Well, hello there, Dippers, and welcome back to Game 23 of the Ducks on the Pond podcast, the official baseball podcast of Sauce on the Side. As always, I'm your host, Drake, joined by the producer, the man, Leighton, Pip Chaventone.
But going with the worst kind of baseball player.
And joining us today, guest host, Lex Glasgow.
June 21, 2019, the Messiah, the greatest right-handed hitter of this millennium, returns to Busch Stadium.
I'm assuming that is Albert Pujols.
That is Albert Pujols.
So guys, be sure every week to listen to the Mothership Show on Mondays. Be sure to listen to Knuckle Sandwich every Thursday, Fantasy 15 every Friday, and even Food for Thought every Saturday morning. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at The Saucy Pod. And be sure to be checking out our website. As fantasy football kicks up, so will the fantasy articles. We have a jam-packed show for you guys today. The Marlins continue to either intentionally, or as Don Mattingly would call it, unintentionally throw at Robert Acuna. Buster Posey decided to have season-ending surgery. The Ohtani watch is back. We have some fallacies for you today, and we're going to talk about the MLB playoff race. But before we get to any of that, Leighton C., producer, you know what to do.
Hey, Ducks on the Pond here, kid. Ducks on the Pond. Let's go now, baby. Drive 'em in. Welcome to Ducks on the Pond.
A Sauce on the Side production. Alright, guys. So the Marlins, they continue to, every time I turn on either ESPN or Baseball Tonight, I just see basically highlights of Robert Acuna dancing around the batter's box trying to avoid pitches from the Marlins players. He's hit .333 with one home run, one hit by pitch, and has been thrown at two other times in this series against the Marlins. I guess it was yesterday on Sunday. He was dancing around the batter's box, almost got hit in the head, and then he almost got hit in the leg. Don Mattingly believes that this is nothing intentional. Guys, what do you think about this? Do you think that this is an intentional act by the Marlins, or do you think that their pitching's just that bad that they can't throw a strike against this guy?
It has to be intentional almost. These are professional baseball players. They're getting paid millions of dollars to do one thing, and that's throw strikes. There's no way that that's not intentional. I mean, honestly, in my opinion, I think for this season, it's best for the Braves to stay out of this beef with the Marlins because they're right in the middle of a playoff hunt and fighting for a playoff spot. It's almost kind of like the Marlins are trying to be, I guess, petty in a way to stay relevant because their season's just trashed.
Yeah, it seems like at the end of the season, if you don't have anything to play for like the Marlins, you want to play spoiler. In playoff spoiler at that. And by that, you would assume that they're wanting to win games and, kind of knock off the top of the division there. But instead, it seems like they're just headhunting the best players on the top teams of this division. And you're looking at Acuna, that's just bad taste. I feel like any time that Acuna gets hit by a pitch or there's a ball that flies right by his head and he has to duck out of the batter's box, these guys for the Marlins should be automatically ejected. The umpire needs to take responsibility there and walk out and be like, hey, we know that there's beef here. You guys have been warned. You guys have been warned. And basically anything other than like a curveball hitting you in the leg should immediately be an ejection.
Yeah, we're talking a lot about the unwritten rules in baseball and how some people know what they are, some people don't know what they are. But later on in the game he got hit, the Braves hit a Marlins player, and the Marlins didn't tell you at all because they knew it was coming. And now that might have ended the beef, but like you said last night, he had like already 2 pitches. So, I don't know. It has to be intentional because I understand crowding a guy who's been hot, but you don't got to crowd somebody that he almost gets hit 3 times.
Yeah,
it doesn't happen.
I understand like the first pitch, like brushing him off the plate, but you're an MLB pitcher. You should be able to hit your spot. And brushing a dude off the plate does not mean that he has to dive 10 feet out of the box just to avoid being hit. Do you guys think that the umpire needs to take responsibility of the game and kind of be able to control that and come out there and say, hey guys, enough's enough, we're not going to have this, and kind of put his foot down?
Yeah, I think he needs to be aware that what's been going on and tell him before the game, if you hit a guy, he's tossed immediately. And if you argue it, you're tossed. And eventually get one umpire thrown at the whole team.
I think the umpires do need to take control of it. I mean, I can kind of see why the umpires are staying out of it. They don't really want to affect the outcomes of these games in the playoff race, but they need to have a meeting with both teams before the game, tell them, hey, you got to knock this off, otherwise we are going to start throwing you out of here.
Yeah, I agree. But, to the point of, determining the outcome of the game, I feel like that's in the player's hands. Like, if you just don't throw at the guy, then you're not going to be ejected. I feel like an ejection doesn't really determine the outcome of the game. The guy who throws at him determines whether or not he's going to stay in the game or not.
I agree with that. But all I'm getting at is, like, I've seen it before where umpires, they go out there and they try to make the game about them a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
You don't want that. They're probably trying their best to avoid that situation is what I'm getting at.
Right.
Yeah.
I just would hate to be the umpire that has the blood on his hands of a guy, who gets hit by a 98-mile-an-hour fastball to the head, because that's just not a good look for you. So I hinted at earlier with Buster Posey. He decided to have season-ending hip surgery. Posey's rehab will be an estimated 6 to 8 months, could be beyond opening day of 2019. This is Posey's 10th season in the majors, and he'll be 32 at the start of next season. Guys, what do we expect out of Buster Posey for the remainder of his career?
I was talking about it before the show, but I have a hard time seeing him play catcher primarily ever again in his career, pitching the hip injury. I mean, he's a career 300 hitter. He batted 284 this season. He didn't hit a whole lot of power anymore, so I think he'll be able to hit for average still, but I don't think he'll play catcher anymore. At least not extended times.
Well, I think a lot of the decline in the power has to do with that leg injury or that broken leg he had a long time ago. And I think this hip injury kind of stems from that a little bit. I mean, your legs are your base when you're hitting the ball. That's where all your power comes from. If you don't have that behind him, he's not going to be able to drive the ball like he could earlier in his career. And I think that has to do with a lot of the decline. Injury like this, you see a guy like Posey, you really don't know how it's going to affect him for the rest of his career. He can either come back healthy or a lot of times like this, being 32, this might just be the downfall of his career completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I look at a guy like Buster Posey who's had a ton of success, and even whenever they decided, hey, we're going to take some miles off his legs and move him over to first, he still was able to have success and play a good glove at first base. So it really makes no sense, in my opinion, if you're the Giants, to sit there and just throw him out there night after night for the remainder of his career. All you're doing is fast-tracking him to another DL stint or possibly the end of his career. I agree with you, Leighton. I think this is the end of Buster Posey playing a primary catcher position, and I think it would be smart for them to actually go out, and either go out and get a guy like JT Realmuto to help that offense, obviously, but more importantly, the defensive side of the ball, so you can take the miles off Posey's legs. Obviously, you can't do anything now since, trade deadline's passed, but for next season, you could possibly go out there and fire off a trade at the beginning of the year, bring in a guy who can play the primary catcher position, or, obviously, they have guys in lower A ball. I don't know really what they have waiting in the wings behind Posey, but I think this is kind of the end of the Buster Posey era catcher.
If you're the Giants, can you kind of see them maybe in the offseason or next season after he comes back healthy, trading him to an American League contender to play the DH spot?
That would actually be really good for his career.
That would extend his career, and it would help the Giants, too, in the long run.
Yeah, send him to the Yankees. That way Leighton has to deal with Buster Posey, too.
Yeah, why not? Bring them all over.
Yeah, send him over there.
Robert Acuna, come on up.
Yeah, get everybody to the Yankees. That way Leighton has to deal with them for the next few years.
Decade?
Huh?
This isn't a few-year thing,
Well,
man.
I mean, Buster
I'm going to be
Posey-
35 dealing with this shit.
Buster Posey, he's a few years.
Okay, Buster Posey's a few-year guy.
Do you guys see Buster Posey getting back to, not necessarily with the power numbers because those are probably gone, but do you see him getting back to a solid, just like a 280, 290, even 300 level guy?
I think it'll be like 280 by what he's hitting right now. I think the hip injury, I bet he's had it for the past season and a half, so that's definitely affected his power number and probably overall hitting ability, but I think he'll be right around these same numbers.
Does it make any sense that you read that he's been injured with a hip injury for a year and a half and they continually just throw him out there to catch?
You want to win, man.
That makes no sense to me. And this is I think, the kind of last straw, the straw that broke the camel's back for your Giants, and they're not going to be winning the West.
Yeah, I was going to say, they're really trying to get me that bet with him playing still, but they just couldn't do it.
They couldn't do it. So, guys, it was the MLB Players Weekend, and as we all know, if the MLB can't even market their own best player, they can't really market anything. But this weekend has actually been a huge success. We've been seeing players be able to put their nicknames on the back of their jerseys, and they've even been able to wear specially designed cleats for each player. I saw that Adam Jones was even wearing the Air Monarchs, the all-time dad shoe that Nike makes, and he actually had them made into cleats. What has been some of your favorite parts of the MLB Players Weekend?
My two favorite things for sure have been Box Burgers jersey for the Diamondbacks. Has just the emoji of a box and then a cheeseburger. And my other favorite thing has been Todd Frazier, his name is the Todd Father. His cleats have Marlon Brando from The Godfather on them. That's pretty sweet.
I think the best part about this weekend is it introduces the casual fan to the players, kind of. It lets you get on like a personal basis with them, get to know who they are. That's a lot of what MLB lacks. You know, you watch the games, you're like, I don't know who this guy is. I mean, this is a perfect opportunity to let the players express themselves, so that way the fans can get a better knowledge of who they are.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that they should even extend this to maybe like a week thing, or have two separate player weekends, one at the beginning of the season so you could get to know these guys a little bit better, and then towards the, right around this time, boom, throw it back into the mix, and then, you get to know these players a lot more, because it seems like there's been more interviews, been more diving deep and kind of learning about these guys. Like Mike Trout, one of my favorite things about the weekend is that he had a family member pass away this week, and he was able to wear their last name on the back of his jersey. And also, probably the most funny thing of this weekend was Rich Hill. On the back of his jersey, it said D Mountain. So you can kind of just use your imagination and figure out the name correlation between the two there. And like I had said, Adam Jones rocking the Air Monarchs, the all-time dad shoe. In case you guys don't know, they're basically the white Nikes that every dad over the age of 50 owns, and I think that was pretty sweet.
Everyone has the tongue pushing out the legs about fall because it can stretch.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Like the Billy tie at that point.
Yeah, no, those are some pretty sweet cleats. Todd Frazier, not only did he wear the cleats that you were talking about, Leighton, he also wore the cleats that had the names of. Todd Frazier was like an all-time hero for the Little League World Series.
They hit a walk-off home run.
And he actually wore cleats that had the names of each one of the guys that was on his team.
That's cool.
During that stretch. So that's really cool. It kind of brings it back home. And right during the Little League World Series, I think this is the perfect time to bring something like this out. Mm-hmm. And even have the guys play there where the kids from the Little League World Series can come and watch them. And, it's not the necessarily like diehard MLB fan bases that you see day in and day out, whether it be, like in New York or out in St. Louis or Chicago. It's kind of just basically more about the game and the players and less about the actual MLB itself, and I think that's really cool. So guys, the Ohtani watch is back. He hit .444 with 1 home run and only 3 strikeouts this week. He now has 14 home runs this season. Still not hitting every day. He threw a bullpen session on Friday and is expected to throw a simulated game this week. I think this was his second bullpen session since the injury. Guys, are we starting to get a little optimistic about Ohtani at this point?
I mean, yeah, I guess he's throwing some time again in the season. Not really sure why, but yeah, it looked to me like he's going to throw the season.
I'm not optimistic about it. I feel the same as I've said the past, 3 weeks about this. Just have the surgery, be done with your season.
Yeah, I'm almost in the middle now. At the beginning, I was standing where Lex was, saying just have the surgery, get it out of the way. But now, like, if he threw the bullpen session and they're letting him throw another one for the, his second one in about a week, it's making me a little more optimistic that maybe this guy will be able to avoid surgery and actually be able to, have a healthy recovery without having to take the surgery as an option. Do you guys think that that's maybe where we're heading at this point with Ohtani?
And yeah, that's how it appears to go. I mean, eventually, though, you'd think he'll have the surgery still.
I think if he doesn't have the surgery this year and he continues to throw, it's going to happen here in the next year or two, regardless.
Yeah, that would really bum me out if we get to the middle of next season and boom,
it's going to linger, I think. Why let it linger?
Yeah, I agree, especially whenever you have a bunch of powerhouses in your division and you're kind of left out at the playoffs at this point. I would hate to see this team next year be in contention and then all of a sudden it flares back up and then we're sitting here talking again how, oh, Tawny, he's starting to throw a bullpen session again. I'm almost in the middle. At the beginning, I was saying, hey, just have the surgery, get it over. But now I'm almost caught in the middle there. So guys, we'll get to anything more than a fallacy. And before we actually get into the fallacies, we're going to do a little housekeeping here. So a few months ago, Leighton, myself, and Cappy, we came on here and we debated whether it was more likely that Paul Goldschmidt would hit 30 home runs or he would be able to reach a 280 batting average. At the time, he was hitting well below the Mendoza line, and a lot of people was questioning Paul Goldschmidt and what has gone wrong with him. Well, today, he's hitting a cool 294 with 30 home runs and a bona fide MVP candidate. So I think we can go ahead and just assume that he's going to get that next home run and continue to keep that average above 280, because at this point I think it'd be pretty hard to dip below 280, dip below that number with a 298 batting average. So guys, the question today, do we think that Paul Goldschmidt will reach 35 home runs and hit 315 this season?
I think 35 home runs is a lock. I think he's deadlocked for that. 315 might be kind of a stretch. I mean, that's almost a full 30 points over what he's at now. I could see it, but I think he's good where he's at. He might win the MVP.
Oh, yeah.
He honestly might win
He
it.
would.
Yeah, I
If
think...
he hits 3 home runs, 315 average, and the Diamondbacks win the division, he probably will win the MVP.
It's going to be him or Freddie Freeman at this point, I believe.
Not Arenado?
No, not Arenado.
Why?
They're not going to win the division. They might not even make the
They're
wild card.
currently tied for the division lead.
They're not going to.
Okay. Well,
I'm interested in this division race, actually, and who's going to win the MVP. More importantly, the MVP. But as far as Paul Goldschmidt goes, I think it's an absolute lock with as hot as he is. I don't see a guy like him being this hot towards the end of the season and then faltering off right before the playoffs. I think he's only going to continue to be dominant. I think the 35 home runs, like Lex said, is an absolute lock. The 315 average, that's going to be pushing it, because he's going to have to continue to be a man on fire throughout the remainder of the season to be able to get up to 315. But with Paul Goldschmidt, a guy who's as good as a hitter as him, and he has the power numbers, but he's not out there swinging for the fences every time, he is the perfect candidate to be able to raise that batting average another 20 points and flirt with the 315 average. I'm going to say I'll say that he'll get up to 310, but 315, that is a pretty hard thing to do.
it's like 21 points is a lot, but shit, I mean, he's raised at how many points? 116 points he was first did this?
Yeah, that's no kidding.
So it's possible. I want to go with Jesper Both. I do think he's the best pure hitter in the National League, definitely for first baseman. So I'm going to go with Jesper Both.
Okay, so the Cubs, this is our second fallacy. The Chicago Cubs have left 994 men on base this season, which is a huge number of guys to leave on base. They are on pace for 1,258 runners left on base this season. Only 12 teams since 2000 have had more, and the 1,258 men left on base would be the most since 2008. Guys, do you think that this team is going to be able to reach that number?
I'm going to go with a firm no, because let's say he says there's 10 left on base. Chris Bryant is still hurt. If he's even alive at this point, I'm trying to question. But no, you guys have been slugging better since the beginning of the season, and that number got really inflated the first 80 or so games, so I don't think there's any way it gets to that high.
I actually watched videos of Chris Bryant taking BP.
He's alive.
So he is alive.
Okay.
He's going to be
Confirmed.
back before the end of the season, I believe. I watched him hit one off the scoreboard, I think, yesterday.
So
in the
he's
video.
fine.
So he's fine.
Very much alive.
Very much alive. Very much alive. He's not dead yet. But I don't think they'll hit that mark. I think that they're a better team than that. I just think that, different guys slumping this year. I mean, the Cubs have had a couple guys that have been really hot, and then they have had a lot of guys that are really cold. And if they can kind of just meet in the middle somewhere, I think they will nowhere even come close to that mark.
Yeah, like Leighton had said, this number was inflated the first 80 so games. And at that point, Rizzo was in and out of the lineup, injured, and he's kind of the main staple of this Cubs lineup. So I feel like those numbers were inflated early on for that reason. But this team added Daniel Murphy, which, in my opinion, was the biggest waiver line, the fifth of the 20 trade deadlines that the MLB has. So I think with him stepping into the lineup, going to second base, and Javier Baez going to short, and kind of knocking out Addison Russell out of that batting lineup every single day will help. Because if you look at Addison Russell, his RBI numbers are ridiculously low for being an everyday starter in this clubhouse. Because, I mean, this whole team is able to drive guys across the plate, and everybody's able to get on. But Addison Russell has not been the guy that we can consistently throw up there and be able to get guys across home plate. Daniel Murphy's going to be a huge help for that. Chris Bryant, he's actually slated to begin his rehab assignment with the Iowa Cubs sooner than later. So I think with the addition of Chris Bryant and the addition of Daniel Murphy, I think that these numbers will go down drastically. And I think that there's absolutely no way that we're even close to the 1,258 mark, because like we had said, that would be the most since 2008, and the Cubs have way too much talent as far as with power numbers to make that happen, especially now with Daniel Murphy and Chris Bryant coming back. I don't think that this is even close to happening. So you guys kind of hinted at the NL MVP race just a second ago. Let's kind of dive into that. We'll kind of go off the cuff here and talk about that for just a second. So in the AL, it's going to be odd because right now Mike Trout's kind of the odds-on favorite to win it, even though his numbers aren't there. It's just the Mike Trout factor of them knowing he's the best player, so they're going to give it to him. In the NL, it's not quite as clear. Right now, Freddie Freeman is the betting favorite to win the MVP. Leighton, you talked a little bit about Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt. Guys, who do we think is going to actually win the MVP? We'll get into this discussion pretty deep over the next couple weeks, but right now, who do you have there?
Well, right now, I mean, Arenado still a half a weeks ago, and that hasn't changed. But Lexi earlier said that there's no way Arenado can win. I'm looking at the stats compared to Freddie Freeman, and I think he can definitely win the MVP award. I don't see why it's impossible at all.
No, it's not impossible, but I don't see it over Freeman. The Rockies, I don't think they're making the playoffs, and if the Braves do get in the playoffs, I think Freeman does get that. Yeah, he gets the edge.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I'm not a firm believer in you have to make the playoffs in order to win the MVP, because baseball is one of those bizarre things, and I always point back to the fact that Nolan Ryan never won a World Series ring. But Freddie Freeman has been a part of this huge turnaround for this team, where we've seen the Rockies in the past just kind of be right around there, flirting with the division, flirting with the wild card over the past few years. And, Freddie Freeman, he got some bats around him. Yes, he does have more help this year, but he's been playing like a man on fire. If you compare the two, I think a lot of the fact that Nolan Arenado plays in Coors with his 31 home runs being there compared to Freeman's. But if you look at the doubles and you just take all of the extra base hits into consideration, it's really not that far off. I think they're actually, Nolan Arenado might have one more extra base hit than Freddie Freeman, so it's not like his power numbers are just way above Freeman's at this point.
I agree, but the thing that, like you said, playing in Coors Field, playing in Colorado, the baseball writers, since they're the guys that decide this, they have not voted a Rockies MVP since 1997 when Larry Walker won.
So well past due, what you're saying.
It is well past due, but it just seems like they don't. It takes a lot for a guy out there to win it, which really that shouldn't hinder a guy's chance to win the MVP, but it does for some reason.
Well, I mean, you look at Michaelis the other day. Do you think Michaelis hits a 428-foot bomb anywhere else in the world?
I don't think so, but I mean, you can't fault a guy for where he plays.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that, but I think you almost have to consider it a little bit, though.
I mean, but it's not a PED. It's not like he's taking something that enhances his thing. It's just where he plays.
Yeah.
It does make a hitting stats better, but I'm reflect. You can't just say this guy can't win something because he happened to get drafted by Colorado.
Yeah, no, I don't think that you should not be able to win it, but I think you almost have to play above and beyond everybody else in order to do it.
That's baseball prejudice. You can't hit people the way they play.
Man, it's so hard to, though. Coming down the stretch, who do you think are legitimate candidates for this?
One guy we haven't talked. Well, all three of these guys, Arenado, Freeman, Goldschmidt, are definitely candidates. And then the two other guys who haven't talked about yet, surprisingly, Matt Carpenter and Javier Baez. I don't have the stats in front of me, but I'm pretty sure they're still both going on good tears.
Oh yeah, no, Javier Baez has been hot, and if you want to talk about like playoff teams and such, you got to look at Javier Baez, who's kind of been the human Swiss Army knife for the Cubs. He's played basically everywhere that the Cubs have needed him, and his batting stats have been phenomenal this year. He leads the NL in RBIs and extra base hits, top 10 in RBIs, home runs, stolen bases, slugging, on base plus slugging, runs, doubles, and triples. So I feel like he's right in the mix. I don't necessarily think that they're going to give him the nod just because of his on-base percentage. And then you look at Carpenter, who has a couple things working against him as well, which is the fact that his batting average is lower than what you'd expect out of an MVP. Maybe, he doesn't have the defensive numbers that, you look at Javier Baez, how well he is in the field. And Matt Carpenter, I think he's kind of hampered just from the fact that he plays in the leadoff spot. This is a guy who has 68 extra base hits compared to 69 RBIs. That is a fallacy in itself. Can this guy get more extra base hits than RBIs? Maybe. And that's absolutely ridiculous. So I think that plays against Carpenter. And the fact that Javier Baez does not get on base like the other three guys we mentioned, I think that hampers him.
We haven't really talked about this either. The three top pitchers in the NL, they lead the WAR category by a significant margin with Nola, Scherzer, and DeGrom. They're way up there, and I've actually read a lot of articles where they think one of those three guys are going to win the NL MVP too, which I don't think a pitcher should win the MVP award. They have their own separate award, so they need to stick with that. But they very well might win the MVP as well.
Yeah, I have a hard time giving a guy the MVP award whenever he pitches he plays every fifth day, whenever all these other guys are going out there and playing well. Whenever you look at who's the most valuable to their team and you treat the award such as that, you would almost be sitting here talking about how it's only a 3-horse race with Freddie Freeman, Matt Carpenter, and Javier Baez. If you treat the award for just who's been valuable, because, the Cubs have been fighting injuries, whether it be Chris Bryant now or Anthony Rizzo at the beginning of the season, he's kind of stepped in and filled the void, basically playing 2 for 1. And Matt Carpenter, whenever he started his tear, the Cardinals were completely almost gone. We could almost write them off. And then now we're sitting here talking about how the Cardinals have the home field advantage in the wild card game. So I think if you look at just who's been the most valuable, I don't think that I don't think it's going to be treated that way, but I feel like it would just be a 3-horse race in that stance.
Yeah, and see, pretty much valuable. Playoff spots already. Looking ahead to season end right now, the 5 guys we discussed, each on a different team that's currently in the playoffs for the National League. And Freeman, Baez, Goldie, and Carpenter.
I think they need to remove the term valuable out of the award.
So just MP, most player?
Or just
best player.
Yeah, best player of the year. Player of the year.
BP.
Player of the year. Just
BP.
make it player of the year, not MVP.
Yeah, I feel like that's almost in every sport, though, how they do that.
Yeah. It just sounds better, MVP.
Yeah, the MVP is hardly ever the MVP, in my opinion. So, guys, we'll go ahead and go towards if the season ended right now. So right now, we have the AL East being led by the Red Sox, who right now might get swept by the Rays and have lost their first series since June 1st. So that's pretty wild. The AL Central, we have the Indians. The AL West, we have the Astros. And then the AL wildcard teams, we have the Yankees and the Athletics. The Athletics, I believe, right now are a game and a half behind the Astros. That's something we're kind of keeping our eye on. Wait and see. Worried about the Red Sox at all? Hey, I warned you about that Rays team.
God, the fucking Rays team. I told you guys last week that it's pushing over yet. You guys both still tell me it is, but it's definitely not. I do think we're in the division. I do think that's going to be how the American League playoffs are, but no, AL East is not over yet.
It's not over, but
it's over.
It's not over, but it is over.
Not over. Not even close. We still have, 34 days of the season left.
If you blow a 10 game, 11 games at the most?
11 and a half, I think, maybe.
11 and a half?
Yep.
How long ago was that?
Earlier this month.
Yeah, so we're talking about, we were laughing about the Astros blowing a 12-game lead in 2 months, and you guys would basically blow the equivalent of that with, 15 less games to play. I don't think that's going to happen because that would be an absolute atrocious just blow up from a
Yep.
team.
I would have to come to Leighton's house and take him and make sure he is not alone for a long time.
Yes, yeah,
It would be
that
some
would
hard
bad.
times.
It would be hard times. I do think that this is how we're going to round up. I think the Astros and the Athletics are going to flip flop all the way through the remainder of the season, but everything else is set in stone. Maybe the Mariners make an appearance once or twice on this list, but I'm kind of leaning towards how this is going to play out. So in the NL, we have the NL East leading Braves. We have the NL Central Cubs. We have the NL West and the wild card are kind of a jumbled mess right now. So the NL West, the Diamondbacks and the Rockies are at a deadlock. Then we go to the wild card. The Cardinals lead the wild card by a half of a game, and then you either have the Diamondbacks or the Rockies, and they are tied with the Milwaukee Brewers. So guys, right now, if you search the list, you have 4 teams sitting in the wild card lock spot, and that's pretty weird to be thinking about whenever we are a month and some
34
change. Yeah, a
days
month
from
and
the
some
season's
change
over.
until the season's over. So, how do we think that this is going to shape out?
A lot of this shows the difference in parity in both leagues. The American League, you know who's the clear cut, but top to bottom in the National League, everybody's just right there, close together, except maybe like a couple of teams. But the Braves got to make it out of Miami healthy before they can win the
Yeah.
East.
Keep Acuna in a bubble wrap.
Yes, send him up there looking like the Michelin Man every at bat.
I wouldn't be against that if I were the Braves.
Just sit him today.
The Cubs are going to be there. The Diamondbacks, I think they're going to be there, and I think basically we're looking at what the NL playoff picture is what's going to look like. I think the Brewers are not going to make it at all.
I don't think so either. I think out of these teams, I'm now all on board the Rockies making the playoffs because, like I said, they can't. So now more on that boat. So I have them winning the NL West. Therefore, the Phillies get the second wild card spot along with the Diamondbacks. Cardinals and Brewers are both left out.
Yeah, I think that Lex hit the nail on the head. Like, we can see that there's actually parity in the NL compared to the AL, because you look at the AL, there are a ton of bad teams over in the AL. In the NL, they're just kind of all jumbled together. And I think that the Braves are going to be able to leg out the Phillies, hold up this lead that they have now started to grow. And I think the Central, the Cubs are all but a lock. And then the West, I think this is going to be something fun to watch. I came on here last week, said that I believe that it would be the Rockies and the Cardinals who make it into the one-game wild card. And I'm going to stick on that because you look at the Cardinals. I said last week that if the Cardinals go 500 in this road stretch that they had on the West Coast, they had to go play the Rockies, they had to play the Dodgers, and they've already locked that up. So I think the Cardinals, they're going to be well on their way to go to the wild card, whether or not it's the Rockies or the Cardinals who have home field advantage. I see the D-backs winning the West. The Cardinals went out and completely just mollywopped the Dodgers in 3 games. So I think the Dodgers are kind of starting to blow up. The bullpen's terrible. Kenley Jansen just hasn't looked right since he's been back. I think even last night they were able to pick up the win, but he still gave up a dinger, and I believe it was the bottom of the 9th, to tie the game. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have that Kenley Jansen going out there to close the door on teams, and you really don't have anybody else that you can rely on in the bullpen, this team should be hitting the panic button, because I think they're sitting in that spot where you have a Rockies team who you're going to have to play, who's tough, day in, day out, can put up numbers at any point. As soon as you roll over to the bullpen against that Rockies team, you're in trouble. You know?
At least they didn't have to give up Anthony from Machado.
No, that is nice. That is nice.
In hindsight, they don't make the playoffs. They say got Machado for basically free.
You'll really be saying that when he's a Yankee next year.
Yeah, like, you should be the biggest Dodgers fan in the world right now.
Let's move on.
So we'll go to the views from the cheap seats. Guys, what are we looking forward to this week in baseball?
So that's actually going to go ahead and Val lost 7 straight wins against the Miami Marlins and Chicago White Sox.
It's a good, bold prediction.
I'm actually going to switch sports and say I'm looking forward to Texas starting their 2019 National Championship run next Saturday against Maryland.
That'll be fun to watch if they're able to pull that off. My view, I'm actually going to stick to baseball. I'm excited to watch this 3-game set in Houston. So the Athletics and the Astros are actually, I think the Athletics are a game and a half behind the Astros right now as we sit. Brett Anderson was actually penciled in to start today They moved him back to tomorrow. So it kind of shows that the Athletics are all in on just attacking the Astros. They want their best on the mound for it, and they're going to try to throw it at them. And the Athletics are taking this serious. They're wanting to go after that division instead of just holding on for a wild card spot, which you throw Brett Anderson against the Twins, you're going to win. They're just assuming that they're going to pick up that win no matter who they throw out there, and they're going to go right after the Astros' throat. I love seeing teams do this, and I think this time next week we're going to be looking at the Athletics as the top holder of the AL West, so I'm looking forward to that.
That'd be interesting to see. That would be.
So anything else before we wrap this bad boy up?
We are now 2 weeks away from being off SoundCloud, so SoundCloud numbers are basically already diminished, but if you're one of the few people on this listening, go to Spotify.
We're also 2 weeks away from the first meat stud.
That is true. A little fast forward to Fantasy 15. And on that note, for Drake, for Lex, and Leighton, Dippers, as always, stay saucy.